I don't have any problem with President Rawlings. Indeed, he gave me my opportunities in life. I mean, when I came in as a young member of parliament, it was his appointment as deputy minister that got me noticed, and then from there he appointed me as Minister of Communications until we left office in 2001. And so I don't have absolutely anything against President Rawlings, and I think we belong to the same party.
Like he's criticized your administration.
Yes.
And still don't have anything against the criticisms?
Well, he's criticized many administrations. He's criticized Kufuor's administration. He's criticized Professor Mills's administration. He's criticized my administration. And so it's his human right to do so. If he thinks that things are not going right, it's his right to offer that criticism. And you take it in good faith. I mean, if you think that the criticism is valuable, you take it. If it's not, you discuss. When you're president, you have to take decisions on a daily basis. And you must listen to criticism and listen to people. But eventually, the decision is yours to take. And so there might have been times where he makes a suggestion, and based on the information I have from national security and intelligence, I realize that he does not have as much information as I have. And so I take a decision that might be contrary to his. Of course, he won't be happy, and so he'll criticize you, but that's what governance is about. That's what the presidency is about.
Your Excellency, let's talk about this description of Ghana as the beacon of democracy in Africa, and consider the facts that we have on the ground. And some believe, for instance, I recall what happened in Cherponi during the by-election, then in Talensi during a by-election. And I recall I was actively involved in covering the Supreme Court hearing of the 2012 election petition, where Justice Atoguba complained bitterly about how politicians make us all sit on tenterhooks every 4 years. I mean, so when you know about all these factors and the fact that every 4 years before elections, we have to spend millions of Ghana cedis just campaigning for peaceful election, it should tell you that we are not that peaceful. We are not that... There's some tension somewhere that we need to deal with. Do we deserve that title, the beacon of democracy in Africa?
I think that Ghana has earned it. I mean, 7 successful elections under our belts is not common in Africa. And so...
Your Excellency, I'm sorry to cut in, but when you talk about 7 successful elections, the 2004 election was contested by your party. 2012 election was contested by the NPP. Successful elections, how do we define what a successful election is?
Let me say something. Our party has always accepted when we lose. It is our opponents who never accept. 2004. In 1992, you know, they described the election as a stolen verdict. In 1996, they described it as the bought verdict. But when they won in 2001, we readily gave power to them. In 2004, Professor Mills conceded the election.
But your party, I remember there was a court case.
That was 2 members of our party decided to go to court, but Professor Mills had conceded. He stood as president. He said he had lost the election. He conceded. He congratulated President Kufuor.
Okay.
So there was no doubt about that. Then in 2008, I remember Professor Mills won. And of course, Nanado was a candidate. He did not congratulate Professor Mills. They didn't concede that election. They even tried to go to court, and all kinds of things happened. 2012 was the worst one. 2012, we went to court for almost 1 year, wasted the whole time, you know, of the government, because we were not sure if we were still the legitimate government or the court decision was going to remove us from office. The international community all decided to wait and see. And so it actually truncated the amount of time we had, you know, to work. But we did our best in 3 years plus to be able to deliver, you know, some of the things we had promised the nation. And then in 2016, we lost. I considered, you know, immediately. It's not like there were no irregularities. I could have gone around and gathered all kinds of examples of overvoting and tied the nation in court again. But I do think that NDC is playing the game democratically. NPP are the ones that often will never accept when they have lost elections. But be that as it may, I say Ghana has earned the accolade beacon of democracy because the elections have been largely successful. and it's not broken down into violence and bloodshed like we've seen in many other countries. And that's why Ghana continues to be given that accolade. But let me caution, we're entering a very dangerous phase. With the rise of all these vigilante groups, and I've heard some NPP party apparatchiki saying they will not abolish the vigilantes and that they're going to use them, you know, to guard this thing. When we're in government, they said they didn't believe in the police service, and that's why they set up those vigilante groups. And now those vigilante groups are all over the place. And so if the other party also decides to put up vigilante groups all over the place, you can imagine the kind of clashes that we can expect to begin
Your Excellency,
to take place.
Sorry, but in 2009, when the ANC came back, we had similar stories compared to the stories we're hearing now about vigilante groups.
They were isolated. Listen, they were isolated. You had Bamba Boys, which was MPP. You had Azoka Boys, which was NDC. You had Boko Boys. You had something. But these were few groups far in between. Now, there are groups in every region, and they have different accolades.
In every party, in every one of the two parties?
No, we don't have. In most regions, we don't have any vigilante groups. No. If you ask to mention any vigilante groups in the NDC, the only name they will mention is Azoka Boys. That's it.
Is it not because the NDC has found itself in opposition, and that should the NDC return to power, we'll find an emergence of vigilante groups who will be demanding that...
No, what I'm saying is that the MPP in opposition formed those vigilante groups because they said they had no trust in the police service, in the security services to protect them. And so remember, they formed the Bolga Bulldogs. Almost every region has its different name. NDC doesn't have that. But I'm saying that if NDC decided to also in every region set up those vigilante groups, what can we expect? And that is why civil society must speak to this vigilantism in a major way, you know, because it has the tendency to lead us into a spiral of violence, not only in respect of just political clashes, but after politics, after elections, how you handle those boys becomes something. Because these are boys you've trained to be physical and to do all kinds of things, and then you come into office, and that's the problem MPP is suffering. Finding jobs for those boys to keep them busy. Because if they're idle, you never know what they'll get involved in. And so I'm saying that civil society must look into this thing and, you know, come up with prescriptions so that we can resolve these issues, so that we don't enter a more dangerous phase of our democracy than we currently have had. But I think that Ghana's democracy will survive because we have enough level-headed people in our politics. It is when the extremists in our parties take control of the party, that is when you have these issues. I think that the moderates must continue to communicate across party lines and make sure that we keep the political temperature at a reasonable level.
Talking about political vigilante groups and communication within the political circles, you were once upon a time Director of Communications for your party. How difficult was it to, and one of your accolades at the time was the gentleman, the John Mahama, who would never insult another. He would just attack the issue and not the personality. It seems there's a change in trend since some of you left that scene. How difficult was it for you to practice communication in the manner that you did, and how different do you see political communication these days?
I think that there's a difference, both in terms of the content of what we say and then also the mediums that we use to communicate. At the time I was Director of Communications, I mean, how many radio stations really were there? I mean, you had Joy FM leading, Peace FM was just coming, you know, on stream. Radio Gold was about there, but GTV and GBC were still by far the biggest broadcaster. And so I guess it was easier to communicate with the people. And at the time, the language of political discourse was more tempered. Unfortunately, in terms of content of political discourse now, there's a lot of intolerance, there's a lot of insulting, there's no respect for authority, there's no respect for, you know, age, and a lot of things, values that we hold sacred are beginning to break down. But also in terms of the mediums in which these communications take place, they're now so varied because it's not only the mainstream media now, you have social media has come of age. And people have the anonymity of just sitting with their phones and sending an insulting post you know, without being seen or known, you understand? And so it's brought a lot of intolerance and insults into our discourse, which is not the best. But it's not only Ghana suffering that, it's all over the world. You know, Twitter, social media has given a certain independence of communication to everybody. So everybody is his own broadcaster now. Because with that little handset, you're broadcasting to the world. Anything you write there is just going into the World Wide Web, and everybody can read it. So
you've occupied the highest office in our land, and you had all the security briefings. Given the chance, would you give some restrictions to social media, for instance?
It's going to be difficult to do. It's not easy.
China has done it, Your Excellency.
Yeah, China has done it, but of course, China has a different culture and it's at a different stage of development from Ghana. Ghana has enjoyed the freedoms, you know, of expression, and it's very strongly ingrained in our